Okay, gang, welcome back. We got a lot to talk about for this next video segment, so let's get started. So when I last left you guys, we had talked about the introduction. We talked about the guitar solo being in an E Locrian natural 6. And then we talked about the main theme that was primarily in D major. It went to D minor, but it was ultimately rooted in D major. And then we talked about how it transitions into what is going to become the song proper. So the way the main body of the song starts, basically it's a verse rooted with an A in the pedal. And I had asked you guys, where were we key-wise? That part we're going to call the A section is essentially a verse with two equal stanzas, and it's separated by a G minor 7. After that, we go into the B section, which is the first chorus of the song. There were a few of you who commented that the verse was in A Dorian, and you wouldn't be wrong. A Dorian essentially has its roots in G major, but we started on A. If we look at a bigger picture, incorporating that first verse, that A section with the B section, what key are we in? There's a semi-valid argument out there that would state that the verse and the first chorus, that whole section, is in E minor. Because the verse is rooted in A Dorian has its foundation in G major. G major is the relative major of E minor. And because the chorus sits on that E minor, or at least it pivots around it, well, logically, we're in E minor, right? E minor.
Yeah, E minor, all right, yeah!
Not really. So what key are we in? Well, we actually never left D major.
You're putting me on.
So if we are, in fact, in D major, there's one major question that we have to address. How do you account for the chords that we're seeing that are not rooted in D major?
That's a good question.
Primarily in the verse with the A minor and the G minor 7. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little advanced theory here. So looking at the first chord, how do we reconcile A minor into D major? Well, A minor is what we would call a secondary chord. And secondary chords are chords that are borrowed from other keys. In this case, A minor comes from what we would call a borrowing of the 4 of 4. In the key of D major, the fourth of D major is a G. In G major, the fourth of G is C. Now C is the relative major of A minor, right? So we can justify A minor in D major by calling it the relative minor of the 4 of 4, okay? A minor is the relative minor of C, which is the 4 of G, which is the 4 of D.
You said a mouthful.
Moving on to the G minor 7, that's actually a little easier to explain. They could have just as easily done a G dominant 7. And that would have been fine. Those of you who have seen Bill Bruford comment that they would sit around for hours talking about whether a note should be sharp or flat, this was probably one of those instances.
We'd all gather around and discuss whether the next bass note should be F or should it be F sharp, and this took a while, as you can imagine.
If we were to use a G dominant 7 here, you would see that we would have a leading tone of a whole step into A. A much stronger leading tone would be as if we flatted the third and made it a half step. So again, that's a technique that classical composers have used forever. They will alter a chord that's in a key just slightly to strengthen the leading tone that goes to the next chord. I don't think that Yes knew what they were doing. I don't even think that a guy like Rick at that young age knew what he was doing. They might not have had the the theoretical proficiency, but they heard what they wanted, and it was a very advanced skill, even if they didn't know why they were doing it. Okay, so now you say, okay, Joe, you explain how those chords fit into D, but what really makes it D? We haven't really reached the part of the song yet where I could kind of prove to you that it's D. So for now, you're just going to have to take my word for it.
My word's as good as yours.
Your word is better than his.
You keep out of this.
And we're moving on. So the first chorus ends on this F sharp minor over B. And then we're thrown into the next section. It's a little abrupt. It's a little sloppy. But what they lack in compositional finesse, they make up for in arrangement. Rick is doing his single notes. Steve's doing a solo. And Chris is doing his usual bouncing around on the bottom. Let's take a listen. That modulation throws us into the key of C. The chords here are very simple. There are little variations that Steve does, but those are essentially the chords. When we get to the second chorus, which we'll call B prime, which is an extended chorus, we are a whole step lower than we were from the first chorus. It is this extension of the second chorus that is going to prove what key we're rooted in, and we're going to use that proof retro back to the first chorus. If you look at this extended second chorus and the chords that are in it, it is textbook diatonic major key stuff. Take a listen. I didn't play the last chord because the last chord actually is a pivot chord to throw us into yet another key. But for now, let's look at what we have here. That chord progression is very reminiscent and actually identical to and in the same key as another very famous song from the same era.
Sing us a song, you're the piano man. Sing us a song tonight.
If we weren't modulating, we would go right back to here. Right? So taking all of that into consideration, if we're to agree now that this extended chorus is in the key of C, then we could take that same assumption and retro it back to the first chorus, which was this whole step above, and then that would justify the secondary chords that I explained to you that were in the verse, and it all matches up into a nice, neat package.
Logical.
However, what's really cool is that unlike the first modulation that we experienced, going from here to here, which I said was kind of clunky and sloppy, this transition now that we go from the end of the second chorus into the second verse is brilliant and is very slick. So we have so we're here and we go back to here. What makes it so slick is that F shifting into the A minor, it puts us back into A Dorian where we were in the first verse, which is going to put us back into D major when the next chorus runs around.
Well, now we're getting somewhere.
I know, it gets confusing. As we move into the second verse, it's the same form as the first verse. You have your two stanzas and you're separated by that G minor thing in the middle. The only thing that's different is the arrangement's a little different, but the form is essentially the same. For all you keyboard players, we have this great sound effect that Rick does. Now those are samples from the actual recording. What is it that he actually records? It's a mellotron string sound. The chord is a C major 7 flat 5. And I want you to remember that chord because that is a very important chord that you're going to see later on in the song. Achieving that sound effect, I think I have an idea as to how they did it. Can't emulate it exactly the way they did it here.
Why not?
Because these are all virtual instruments and virtual knobs and everything. Back then, in the good old days, it was analog. They used volume pedals and boxes with switches on them, and you can't replace that. What I think he did was he would swell up the mellotron with a volume pedal and back it off really quickly. It sounds to me that Eddie Alford put a little delay and reverb on one channel, on one side, and left the other side dry. So if you listen to this, you'll hear on the right side, there's a delay and an echo, where on the left side, it's dry. Again, I can't get it exact. For Awaken, and when we play the song, it's just easier for me to sample it. I cheat. When we get to the next section, it's tough to pigeonhole and classify Yes music into conventional pop song nomenclature like verse, chorus, bridge, because they do stuff that's just so not normal that it's easier just to assign these sections as letters like you would in classical music. So I'm going to call this the D section. The studio version to me sounds like a combination overdub of the RMI electric piano and a Moog. And then mellotrons underneath. Hard to replicate in 1972, so of course he had to switch it up. And he kept it that way, and it was fine. And so that's what I play. The end of that section, which is this, is that verse figure repeated again. So now we're in that C section again, or bridge if you want to give it a conventional name, but we are a step higher than we were in it before.
Sudden cold shouldn't take away the start to memory. All in all, the journey takes.
Remember, we modulated back to D for the second verse and that interlude section. We haven't come out of it. We're still there. And like the second chorus is the full extended chorus. So we have that descending chord pattern like we did last time, again, a step higher. And because it's Yes, they have to throw another curveball at us, because why wouldn't they? And with that last chord, they modulate again and throw us back down into C. Even though it may sound like that figure and the counter figure that the organ plays is in F, it's really not. You could hear it's very much C. So that figure goes a few times. Before we modulate again into I Get Up, I Get Down, which is in E major. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. I know I threw a lot of stuff out at you. It was a lot to cover in this section. I know I just skimmed the surface. There are a lot more questions. There's a lot more to talk about. If you have any questions, of course, that's what the comment section is for. So let's continue the conversation. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.